let's get started. So let's go back over to ChatGPT and we'll ask for a style guide. Create a style guide that can be used for the Healthy Habits website.
Sure. Here's a style guide that can be used for the Healthy Habits website. Color scheme. The color scheme for the Healthy Habits website should be light and calming to promote wellness and healthy habits. The following colors are recommended. Primary color, number 4A 4A 4A, dark gray, secondary color. Number 6 FBFA5, light green, accent color. Hashtag F2A154, orange, typography. The typography for the Healthy Habits website should be clean and easy to read. The following font families are recommended. Heading font. Open Sans, sans serif body font. Lotto, sans serif layout. The layout for the Healthy Habits website should be clean and easy to navigate. The following layout is recommended. Header. Should include the website logo and navigation menu. Navigation menu should be displayed horizontally at the top of the page and include links to the main sections of the website. Main content should be displayed in the center of the page and include the main sections of the website. Sidebar should be displayed on the right side of the page and include links to related content or additional resources. Footer should include copyright information and links to social media profiles. Buttons. The buttons on the Healthy Habits website should be easy to identify and use. The following button styles are recommended. Primary button. Number 6 FBFA5, light green, with white text and a rounded rectangle shape. Secondary button. Hashtag F2A154, orange, with white text and a rounded rectangle shape. Forms. The forms on the Healthy Habits website should be easy to fill out and submit. The following form styles are recommended. Form field. Should include a label, input field, and placeholder text. Submit button. Should be styled as a primary button. Images. The images on the Healthy Habits website should be high quality and visually appealing. The following image styles are recommended. Hero image. Should be displayed at the top of the page and be visually striking to capture the user's attention. Section images should be displayed throughout the main content sections to visually break up the text and reinforce the topic of the section. Thumbnail images should be displayed on the sidebar and be visually appealing to encourage the user to click through to related content. Overall, the style of the Healthy Habits website should be clean, calming, and easy to use to promote healthy habits and wellness.
All right, awesome. So here we want to start by going ahead and copying this, because this is going to be one of the things that we're going to need to have on hand to kind of remind ChatGPT every so often while we are creating a web page or a website with ChatGPT. So now what we'll do is we'll go ahead and ask ChatGPT to recreate the website using the style guide that it's just provided. So let's go ahead and make that request. Recreate the Healthy Habits website using this style guide.
As an AI language model, I don't have the ability to create a website from scratch, but I can give you some tips and guidance on how to use the style guide to recreate the Healthy Habits website. Color scheme. Use the recommended color scheme for the website's background, headings, text, links, and buttons. Typography. Use the recommended font families for headings and body text throughout the website. Layout. Use the recommended layout for the website, including a header with a logo and navigation menu, main content in the center, sidebar on the right, and footer with copyright information and links to social media. Buttons. Use the recommended button styles and colors for primary and secondary buttons. Forms. Use the recommended form field style with labels and input fields, and style the submit button as a primary button. Images. Use high-quality images that match the recommended styles for hero, section, and thumbnail images. Use appropriate HTML and CSS to structure and style the website. Remember to also consider user experience and accessibility when recreating the website. Ensure that the website is easy to navigate, readable, and responsive to different screen sizes. Use semantic HTML and provide alt text for images to make the website accessible to all users. Good luck with creating the Healthy Habits website using this style guide.
At this point, ChatGPT has kind of rejected our request, but what we could do is we could come back and go to edit our prompt, and we could say recreate the Healthy Habits website. We could say recreate the following Healthy Habits website using this style guide. And now we can just paste the HTML and the CSS. So we will have to add both files, and let's see if now we can get a better response from ChatGPT.
Sure, here's a recreation of the Healthy Habits website using the style guide provided. And here's the corresponding CSS code.
Okay, and here you'll notice that ChatGPT has kind of run out of steam and it stopped at this list item. So just from going back and forth in this last experience with fixing our problem with the list items, we know that there's more code than this on the CSS. So when this happens, we simply need to ask ChatGPT to complete the code. So we'll tell it to complete the CSS. Complete the CSS.
Oops, it seems that the last line of CSS was cut off. Here's the complete CSS for the Healthy Habits website. Hope this helps.
All right, so now a couple of things that I want to bring to your attention is that number one, ChatGPT does at times, when you're working with it to create websites, at times it will stop in the middle of the code. And so in order to, after it generates so many lines of code, it will just stop. So some tips on keeping it, on making sure that you can get all of the code is number one, you want to make sure that your HTML and your CSS and JavaScript are all on separate files, or they are all in separate code snippets. So it is possible to generate code, all three, HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, all in one code snippet. But when it does that, it's not using the external file method. So we want to make sure that it's always provided to us as separate files. And that will make it so that when we run into situations like this, where the HTML was finished, so it actually completed the HTML, but it ran out of steam by the time it got to this line of the CSS. Well, at this point, all we need to do is say complete the CSS. And you'll notice that it started over. So it did not just come to the list item and complete the list item rule, complete everything from the list item rule set on down, but it started over. So you can imagine if they were all on the same code snippet, it would have started the whole thing over and we would have stopped around the same spot. So by us requesting separate files, that actually gives us the ability to request just one file, the file that it stopped on, and now it can generate all of the code. So that's just a helpful tip. So here we simply come back, and I'm not sure if any of this was changed, but it doesn't look like it. But just to avoid having to come back, I'm just going to go ahead and copy the HTML and we'll take it back over to our code editor and I will paste it for the HTML, and then we'll do the same for the CSS. I'm now going back over to ChatGPT and I'm copying the second code snippet that it provided for the CSS, and I'm going to delete what I originally had, and I'll paste it here. So now let's go ahead and run the, okay, awesome. So here I wonder if I put this on here twice. It looks like that could be the case. So let me try that one more time. I'm just going to delete all of this and then copy the HTML and paste it. All right, and click run. So now we only have the one website. All right, and it has provided us with the new added buttons that follow the style guide. But what I'm looking at is that now it looks like the list items are now back together. So let's go back and check the style guide or the style sheet. So after we were able to fix the problem, now it would appear that it has somehow gone back to what the original problem was. And we still have the same margins. We still have what appears to be the same CSS, but with the addition of these buttons. And let me go back over to the HTML just to make sure that nothing has been added in line here. Okay, it's looking good. Let's go back and we will continue to work with this issue. But for now, let's ask ChatGPT to add the HTML or to add the JavaScript so that we can see if there is any functionality that ChatGPT can add to our Healthy Habits website. So let's go back over to ChatGPT and we'll just say add the JavaScript.
Sure. Here's an example of JavaScript code that could be used for the Healthy Habits website. In this example, we're using JavaScript to add event listeners to the primary and secondary buttons in the main section of the page. When the primary button is clicked, an alert message will appear on the page. When the secondary button is clicked, the user will be redirected to the blog page, assuming that there is a file called blog HTML in the same directory as the current page. Of course, the JavaScript code you use may be different depending on the specific functionality you want to add to the website.
All right, so I went ahead and added a blog.html file, and we'll go ahead and copy this and take it over to our code editor and paste this on the JavaScript file. And here we actually need to add the script tag to our JavaScript, to our HTML file. But let's assume that we did not know that and go ahead and click run. Okay, and at this point it is simply taking us back to the top of the page. So we're not going anywhere with the buttons. The buttons are not functional because we haven't added the script, but as a brand new coder, we might not know that. So let's go back and let's present ChatGPT with the problem. So we may just know that the buttons are not working. So let's go over to ChatGPT and say the buttons are not working. The buttons are not working.
If the buttons aren't working, there are a few things you can check. Make sure that the JavaScript code is properly linked to the HTML file. Check that the script tag in the HTML file has the correct source and that the file containing the JavaScript code is saved in the correct directory. Check that the class names used in the JavaScript code match the class names in the HTML file. For example, if the class name in the HTML file is btn primary and the JavaScript code is looking for a class name button primary, the code won't work. Check that there are no errors in the JavaScript code. Use the browser's developer tools to look for any syntax errors or other issues that may be preventing the code from running. If you've checked all of these things and the buttons still aren't working, you may want to try simplifying the JavaScript code to see if there's a particular line or function that's causing the problem. For example, you could try removing the event listeners and just adding a simple console log statement to see if the code is running at all. Once you've narrowed down the problem, you can start debugging from there.
All right, so ChatGPT gave us three things to look into, and these are some very good suggestions. So this first suggestion says make sure that the JavaScript code is properly linked to the HTML file. Check that the script tag in the HTML file has the correct source and that the file containing the JavaScript code is saved in the correct directory. So we would need to be able to break this down a little bit in order for this to work for someone that was just now being introduced to coding. And we'll first ask, how do we make sure that the JavaScript code is correctly linked to the HTML file?
To ensure that the JavaScript code is correctly linked to the HTML file, there are a few things you can check. Make sure that the script tag in the HTML file has the correct source. The source should be the path to the JavaScript file, either a relative or an absolute path. For example, this assumes that the JavaScript file main.js is located in a directory called JS in the same directory as the HTML file. Check that the file containing the JavaScript code is saved in the correct directory. Make sure that the file is saved in the same directory as the HTML file or in a subdirectory of the HTML file. Check that the class names used in the JavaScript code match the class names in the HTML file. If the class names don't match, the JavaScript code won't be able to find the elements it needs to modify. Check that there are no errors in the JavaScript code. Use the browser's developer tools to look for any syntax errors or other issues that may be preventing the code from running. If you're still having trouble, you could try adding a simple console log statement at the beginning of the JavaScript code to see if the code is running at all. For example, if you see this message in the console, then you know that the JavaScript code is linked correctly to the HTML file and is running.
All right, so here, ChatGPT on this first code snippet has provided us with the script tag to add to the HTML. So the next thing that we need to know is where to put the script tag. So let's ask, where do I add the script tag?
The script tag should be added inside the head or body section of the HTML file, usually towards the end of the section. Here's an example. In this example, the script tag is added after the link tag for the style sheet but before the closing head tag. The source of the script is script.js, which assumes that the JavaScript file is located in the same directory as the HTML file. Note that you can also include the script tag at the end of the body section, just before the closing body tag. This is a common practice and can help improve the page's loading time. However, if the JavaScript code needs to manipulate the HTML elements in the head section, for example, to change the title of the page, it should be included in the head section.
All right, so here it has suggested two locations, and the first location was in the head of the HTML file. So it then said that you could also include it at the end of the body section just before the closing body tag. And it also said that that was a common practice to help improve the page's loading time. So if we are not going to be adjusting anything in the head with the script tag, then we could put it at the bottom of our body section. But let's go ahead and copy just this line, and we'll go ahead and add it to the head. So I've copied it. Now I'm going to go back into the code, and we're ready to paste it at the end of the head section. So go ahead and paste, and now we'll click run. And the buttons now should be functional. Nothing's happening for either one. So let's go ahead and check to make sure that the script tag is the source matches the file, which it does, script.js, that works. And then after that, the next suggestion was to check the names used in the JavaScript match the names used in the HTML file. So let's go back into our JavaScript, and we have a primary button and a secondary button. And okay, so here we have button primary and button secondary. So one thing that we'll want to do is, again, approaching this from a brand new coder. Here it is. So button primary and button secondary. So this actually looks fine. Let's just make sure that it's not a loading issue again. So we're supposed to have pop-ups. I'm also going to open this up full screen to make sure that that's not the problem. Nope, no pop-ups. So at this point, we'll go back over to ChatGPT and tell ChatGPT that the buttons are still not working. The buttons are still not working.
If the buttons are still not working, there could be a few reasons why. Make sure that the class names used in the JavaScript code match the class names in the HTML file. For example, if the class name in the HTML file is btn primary and the JavaScript code is looking for a class name button primary, the code won't work. Check that the JavaScript code is actually running. You can add a console log statement to the code to make sure that it's being executed. For example, if you see JavaScript is running in the browser console, then the code is running and the issue is elsewhere. Make sure that the JavaScript code is included in the HTML file with the correct path. If the script tag has an incorrect path to the JavaScript file, it will not run. Check for any syntax errors or typos in the JavaScript code. This can often cause the code to stop running altogether. Make sure that the HTML elements being targeted by the JavaScript code actually exist on the page. For example, if the code is trying to find a button with a class name of btn primary, but there is no button with that class name on the page, the code won't work. If none of these solutions work, you may need to provide more information about the issue you're experiencing or consult with a developer.
Okay, so here we have been provided with some new JavaScript, and it now includes the console.log line. So the only other issue with this code snippet is that now it's gone from button-primary to btn-primary. So we'll have to know that the names of the button have been changed, and we'll need to correct that. So let's go ahead and copy the code and go back over to our code editor. And here We will paste it. Actually, to prevent having to change the names of the buttons, we can go ahead and just add the first line, which is the console.log. So I'm going to copy that, and I'll make some room at the top and paste the console.log line. Then we'll click run. And it's also asked that we use the developer tools to make sure that the JavaScript is running. So in Riplet, in order to open the developer tools or even the console, you'll just click here where it says toggle developer tools. And it should be coming up at any point here. There we go. All right, so it says that JavaScript is running, so there's no problem with the JavaScript being linked. So the JavaScript is properly linked to the index.html file. But the error that does come up is a type error, and it says that it cannot read the properties of null, reading add event listener. And then let's go ahead and see if we can copy this and paste, because it says that we may need additional, need to provide additional information. So if we can, we'll copy, go back over to ChatGPT and paste the error.
The error message type error, cannot read properties of null, reading, add event listener, usually means that the JavaScript code is trying to add an event listener to an element that doesn't exist. In your case, the error is occurring on line 9 of your JavaScript code. This suggests that the code is trying to add an event listener to an element that may not be present on the page or may not be found by the query selector method. To fix this issue, you should check that the element you are trying to target actually exists on the page and that the class name used in the query selector method is correct. You could also add a console log statement before the line that's causing the error to see what element the code is trying to target. For example, you could modify your code like this. This will print the value of the primary button variable to the console, which will help you determine if the variable is null or if the class name is incorrect. If you're still having trouble, you could try simplifying the code to see if there's a particular line or function that's causing the problem. Once you've narrowed down the problem, you can start debugging from there.
Okay, so here we've been given another method to kind of test out. So let's go ahead and copy this line, and we will add this code to our code. So let's go back and go to our code editor. It says above the add event listeners, so it should be added here. All right, and let's go ahead and run the code. All right, so here it's returning as null, and it says that this will determine if the variable is null or if the class name is incorrect. So here it's returning as null. And again, approaching this from a new coder perspective, we'll then go back and say that the console returned null, and then see what ChatGPT says, because at this point, of course, the buttons are still not working. So let's go back over to ChatGPT. The console returned a null value.
If the console log statement you added returned null or undefined, it means that the element with the class name btn primary could not be found on the page. There are a few things you can check to resolve this issue. Make sure the HTML file includes a button with the class name btn primary. If the class name doesn't exist in the HTML, JavaScript won't be able to find the element. Check that the class name in the query selector method is spelled correctly and matches the class name used in the HTML file. If there's a typo or a mismatch in the class name, the element won't be found. Make sure that the JavaScript file is correctly linked to the HTML file. Check the path in the script tag and make sure it's pointing to the correct file location. Check that the JavaScript code is running after the HTML has loaded. You can wrap the code in a window onload function to ensure that it runs only after the page has loaded. This code will wait for the HTML to load before running the JavaScript, which can help ensure that the buttons are present on the page before the code tries to access them. If none of these solutions work, you may need to provide more information about the issue you're experiencing or consult with a developer.
Okay, so here we still have what we've been provided with some of the same things to check, but we've also been provided with another way that we can check to and kind of troubleshoot to see what the problem is. And at this point, again, approaching this from a new coder perspective, this would actually be a good way for someone that was new to programming or someone that was new to coding to really get some experience on troubleshooting and different ways to identify problems. So this may be a good exercise for someone that is new to coding to do. So here, let's go ahead and start at number 1, which is making sure that the HTML file includes the class name btn primary. Now, this assumes that our JavaScript has btn primary. However, our JavaScript has button primary, and so does the HTML. So that does not appear to be the case. So the next thing that I think that we'll do is simply copy both the JavaScript and the HTML and tell ChatGPT that the buttons are not working. All right, so then it says check the class name for the query selector and make sure that it's spelled correctly and matches the name in the HTML file, which it does. Make sure that the JavaScript file is correctly linked. We've done that. And check the JavaScript code is running after the HTML has loaded. Okay, so in order to do that, we would add the window. But before we do, let's go ahead and add the HTML and the CSS code and then tell ChatGPT that the buttons are not working. So just going to add the HTML and the JavaScript. And in this case, I'm adding them as separate files. However, if there's a problem with this, I will just add the JavaScript inside of the HTML and then paste it. But I'm going to try it this way first. And we also could say debug the following code.
It looks like the class names used in the JavaScript code do not match the class names used in the HTML file. In the HTML file, the buttons have class names button primary and button secondary, but in the JavaScript code, the selectors are using button primary and button secondary instead of just button primary and button secondary. To fix this issue, you can update the selectors in the JavaScript code to use the correct class names without the dot. Also, make sure that the script.js file is in the same directory as your HTML file and that the file path in the script tag is correct. Once you've made these changes, save the files and reload the page to test the buttons.
So it's basically saying that it is using button primary and button secondary. The query selector was using dot button primary and dot button secondary. So we then remove the button or remove the dot from in front of the button, and it's still not working. So let's go ahead and copy the code, and we'll just do the same thing again, because that was one thing that I noticed helped ChatGPT solve the problem a little faster, was just copying and pasting the code. And this time we'll try to just say debug the code. No, instead of saying that, we'll try that on the next one. I want to make sure that ChatGPT already knows the problem. All right. So I did.
The issue is with the way you're selecting the button elements. Instead of using the class selectors directly, you need to use the class selector with a dot in front of it. So change these lines. 2. This should correctly select the button elements and allow the event listeners to work.
No. So now it's telling us to go back and put the dot back in front of it because it's a class. So again, it's telling us to put the dot back, which is the one that we just removed. So we will try this one more time, and then we will tell it to debug the code. All right, so I'm coming back to paste the code.
It seems that there is still an issue with your JavaScript code. In line 9 and 10, you need to add the before the class name in the document query selector method. Here is the corrected code. Make sure to save your script file and reload the page in the browser. The error message type error. Cannot read properties of null, reading, add event listener, suggests that one of the buttons could not be found by the JavaScript code. Looking at the code you provided, it seems that the selectors for the buttons are correct, so there may be an issue with the HTML code. I would suggest double-checking that the classes button primary and button secondary are correctly applied to the buttons in the HTML code. You can also try adding console log statements before the selectors to verify that the elements are being found by the JavaScript code.
So here, it basically says that it looks like the buttons are correct and that we need to check the HTML. So let's go back, check the HTML. Back in the HTML, and I'm seeing button primary and button secondary both applied to the class, and the query selector is selecting that class of button primary and button secondary. Well, at this point, we will go ahead and ask ChatGPT to provide some new buttons for the HTML. So we're going to copy this HTML and take it back over to ChatGPT and just request new JavaScript for the buttons.
Sure, here is the JavaScript code to add functionality to the buttons in the HTML code you provided. This code first gets the two button elements using the query selector method, which selects the first element that matches a specified CSS selector. Then, it adds event listeners to each button using the add event listener method. When the primary button is clicked, an alert message will be displayed. When the secondary button is clicked, the user will be directed to a blog page with the URL blog HTML.
All right, so at this point, I think the main issue is the primary button, and the secondary button has not been set up yet when it comes to the link. So I'm gonna go back, and that is probably the issue. So it's the primary button here. Let's go ahead and look at the code. So here, the primary button is supposed to display an alert. And then here on the secondary button, that button has the path to that button has not been set in the HTML. So that part it's been going to the blank href, but The primary button, however, should have been working. And at this point, it would work regardless. The secondary button would work regardless because it is now set up through the HTML to be sent to this blog. So it has brought us to the blog site, which has nothing on it. However, that was the secondary button. And on the primary button, we're still not seeing the pop-up that's supposed to come up. So I'm going to change the HTML to see if I can get the alert to come up. Okay, I was able to identify the issue, and the issue was actually the location of the script tag. And so I've removed the script tag from the head and placed it right before the closing body tag. And now when you click on the button, the alert comes up that says, "Thank you for your interest in our products and services." And at this point, we have, however, accomplished our goal, which was to create a simple website using ChatGPT. So initially on the simple website, all we needed was a header, a nav bar, a main, and a footer, and we have all of that. All right, so let's go ahead and go back over to the lecture and see what's next.